We're just recording today's meeting for any reporters that weren't able to make it. So I'll introduce myself again. I'm Donna Ditson. I'm the Community Resilience Coordinator. And what we wanted to chat with you about today is the results from the engagement for the Draft Climate Action Plan. Let's see. Okay. So we held an extensive engagement process, and it ran from April to October this year. There were webinars, there were community ambassadors doing outreach at market tables throughout the region. We held a series of dialogue circles. We held 20 open houses. From the open houses, you can see that we had 1,170 estimated participants that came to that. Some of those are repeat guests who came a few times. We also were open to receiving emails and letters. We had an online platform that was available for 3 months where people could come and have conversation and discuss what they thought about the climate action plan and different components of it. And then we also held a survey. So in total, we received just over 3,500 comments. So just a little breakdown of how the feedback was coded and analyzed. A lot of the comments had one specific thing that they were talking about, but there were also quite a few comments that had multiple topics. So what we did is we broke things down by main topic. So you'll see here, this list is basically all of the climate action pathways that we had identified where we had actions that we were proposing for public feedback. And there's also a couple of other topics that came up in here. So one is the engagement process. So people had some concerns about how the engagement process was going. There were also some concerns about communications that were brought up. You'll see that number there, it says 140. That is numbers that were coded as the main topic, but there were also another 104 mentions as a subtopic. So there were about 244 comments related to communications in specific. And then there was another one here on community resilience, where we were asking people what community resilience looked like to them. Okay, so just to go into a bit more detail of how the feedback was coded and analyzed. So it's broken down by the main topic, which is that first column that you see there. And then it was broken down by what are people talking about? What are the themes, and if they're talking about the specific climate actions, which actions are they referencing? And so this is just a brief glimpse into the coding that we were using. These could expand. So if people had more things that they wanted to talk to about these, it could expand. I think there was room for about 3 more codes to be added for each topic. And if the codes there wasn't enough room within one code, then it was stretched into another topic. So for example, if you want to look here at transportation and mobility, the orange ones, you can see the top one there, one saying we need to do more, and that's about buses and public transit. And the next one below that is transportation and mobility, and that's someone who is interested in measuring impact and progress of the electric ferry idea that we had proposed in the climate action plan. So that's just how it was broken down. So I'll just run through the topics of high interest. You would have seen this already in the backgrounder for the media release. But here's just a quick summary of that, as well as some example sticky notes that we received on the different topics. So for the engagement process, that was something that we received quite a few comments on. And so in that, residents were talking about a referendum, they were talking about town halls, and they were talking about increased opportunities for engaging and sharing their feedback. One thing to note about all of the comments here is that they're not divided based on support and opposition. They're put together in terms of how many people are talking about this particular topic. There was a lot of nuance to them, less so with the engagement process, but more for some of the other ones. So it was hard to tell. It was hard to break them down specifically by do people support this or not. But so some of these comments about the engagement process were dialogue between participants, where some were saying we want a referendum and some were saying no, we don't. So those are some example sticky notes right there saying a referendum is needed, and post-its don't replace conversation. These are just some example sticky notes. As far as our next hot topic, it was transit and active transportation. So residents want to see additional transit options, safer road conditions to allow for more biking and safe walking, and they'd like to see more trails. And you can see some sticky notes there just supporting what they've been saying. The next one is the right to choose. So we heard a lot from residents that they wanted to be able to opt in and decide if they were going to participate in a particular action or not. They didn't want things to be mandated for them. So you can see there the sticky note saying less RDCK control. We need less regulations, not more. Another key concern that we heard was that people wanted clear and direct communication. They wanted simpler language and they wanted more outreach from the regional district. One example of what people were saying was this quote from a resident: use language more people can understand, please. We also heard quite a bit about affordability, so residents being concerned about the cost of living and then wanting the RDCK to be efficient and to keep costs down. And you can see that supporting sticky for that. There is also a lot of concern about emergency preparedness. So residents are wanting the regional district to do more to prevent wildfires and to put them out sooner. We also heard from residents that wanted to be empowered to help fight the fires. We heard quite a bit that there was interest in looking for local solutions. So taking the desires of individual areas and rural perspectives into consideration as well. And there was quite a bit of support for farmers. But for example, that would be to do with making sure that farmers had access to water and had systems for storing it and had good irrigation. And they were very, very clear that any support for farmers must be voluntary. You can see some example sticky notes there, such as support for small farmers or tax breaks for farmers. As far as step code and retrofits, residents were quite concerned about costs around that. They're opposed to early adoption of the new provincial step code, and they don't want increased regulations. There was some misunderstanding in this category where they thought that retrofits would be imposed on them when that's not the case. So you see that sticky note there, not interested in mandatory retrofitting. And then they're talking again about, you can see the overlap in this one sticky note that says accelerating the step code would be a financial punishment to regional district residents. And you can see some overlap there between this is a comment about step code, but also a comment about affordability. So you can see the overlap and how we are capturing things so that they reflect both of the comments that people have on that. The next one was about water protection and conservation. So there was a lot of interest in water stewardship and incentives for that. And we did hear from some residents that they want any conservation to be voluntary. About electric vehicles, we heard concerns about the province banning new gas vehicles. And we heard that they're concerned about the cost of electric vehicles, about grid capacity to support them, and additional concerns about that. We also heard some discussion of climate science. And so the number of comments that we have on that is again, it's a kind of a dialogue between residents. So there were people who were saying that they were skeptical of climate science or they didn't know if carbon specifically was causing climate change. And then there were some comments from residents talking about just back and forth dialogue on that. We received some comments on renewable energy. A lot of these comments you'll see also reflected in other categories here, such as grid resilience and affordability and having the freedom to choose. So this sticky note, for example, is talking about micro hydro and geothermal. We did hear that some residents are concerned about external forces and concerned that the regional district is being unduly influenced by external forces, including the provincial and federal government. We also heard that there was some concern about the World Economic Forum. You can see some of the comments that we received on that here, where someone is saying stop the World Economic Forum controls, and someone saying that the regional district should be protecting us from World Economic Forum and United Nations mandates, not implementing them. And there was some, in this category, there was some concern about in this category, there was some concern about other organizations with ill intent that were trying to harm and control. And then the next one here we have is grid resilience. So residents are concerned about the impact that increased demand for electricity will have on the reliability of their power supply, and that's especially in rural areas. Um, so ideally, future RDCK climate action will reflect these following values, and these are based on things that we've heard through the feedback process. So what we heard that people are asking for is to have the right to choose, for there to be clear and direct communication, for there to be local solutions, for the regional district to have increased resilience, and interest in working together and following with shared values. And so Paris was going to present on this next slide here about what the data shows us.
Thank you, Donna. When we looked at the analysis of the actions that are proposed within the Climate Action Plan, and we saw some interesting trends. First, as a reminder that there are 99 actions within the Climate Action Plan. 27 of those are regulated, so most of them are regulated by the province, some are regulated by the federal government. There are also 41 actions that are not regulated, but they're in existing work plans. That means that they have direction from the board to proceed and are underway. So the actions that are of interest or of proposed are the 31, and those are not in work plans and not regulated. So those are really the ones that are the actions that we are proposing for discussion, because there's the most discretion to change or remove them. They've been included in the Climate Action Plan because they are significant towards getting us towards there are significant actions required to getting us towards our goals of 50% reduction by 2030 and 100% reduction by 2050. If you move over to the third column, and we'll come back to the central column, of the 31 actions, there was a consistent split of the 99 and also the specific 31 of about 29 or 30% supporting, having high support for those actions, 16 to 19% of the actions receiving low support from residents, and then the remainder, about 51 to 55, being mixed. And that mix could denote support or opposition, or more often there was people seeking clarification, like that action that Donna was recommending about water conservation. Often there was a confusion that water conservation meant water metering, and so then there was a confusion around that, or people who are unsure. What's interesting about this split is that it is also consistent with how we understand a split in general of for support of climate action, for not support of climate action, and then the middle 50 to 60% of residents who are unsure or concerned in some ways, but unsure about how to take action. If you look at the central column, what is supported, the themes of support largely fall into 4 categories. So agriculture receives strong support, as Donna was saying, particularly if there was autonomy to farmers to make choices about how to manage their livelihoods. Water is of strong support, and again, with that caveat of it being voluntary, but the concern for watersheds, the concern for protecting water is high in residents' minds. Wildfire resilience is also a high priority, as is emergency preparedness. Actions that had the least amount of support were electric vehicles. This was, and again, seen as something that was, if it was being forced on residents, that there was high concern. And then there's also concern around the ethical nature of how materials are sourced. Step code is a concern, as it is seen as a question of affordability to residents and making life less affordable. Land use planning and zoning. There was support for it, but there was also concern again in that category of autonomy and residents wanting to make decisions without a level of control from government. And then the last category, retrofits, is similar to step code, and so not wanting regulated or required retrofits. Thank you, Donna. Yes, and yeah.
Thanks, Paris. So that's the end of what we had wanted to present to you, and we're available to take any questions that you might have. Paris, did you want to turn off the recording here?